Tracy, okay, this is so great. A little bit of backstory for our Free Press friends. You and I met cute on Twitter when we were both investigating the FEC docs on the digital campaign for Trump's digital campaign. And I remember it was my birthday of last year, and there could have been no better birthday present than meeting somebody as brilliant as you and as expert as you. And just to give our friends a little bit of background, you're a trial lawyer with decades of experience, with a lot of insight and knowledge on the nuances of fraud cases, as well as.
With respect, how do prosecutors think in handling white-collar cases? How do defense attorneys think in handling white-collar cases?
Exactly.
And particularly in a high-profile case where the prosecution can't risk making any mistakes.
And one of the first things you told me to calm my noise was simply that you were the first person to tell me that Robert Mueller is aces and that he assembled a team of incredible prosecutors and that the first two people he pulled in were among the best of the best. And that was very reassuring.
And you can have a great team, but still the prosecution has to have evidence. They need documents. They need something that no one can challenge in court. And in terms of credibility or whether someone has a motive to lie. So it's, they will not, whatever case they file, they want to make sure it's going to be bulletproof.
Beautiful. And in this, with all the eyes of the world on this, obviously we know what's at stake. A couple of things that you taught me very early on. Number one, that Trump is in effect kind of mirroring a mob boss. He's not going to have a trail of emails himself personally. And in fact, he has operates where he has other people do things for him. And explain a little bit about the nuances of that. Everyone was looking for a smoking gun. You said not going to find it.
Well, and that's what makes it difficult in a case like this because he's not using email. He doesn't even like to use the mail. He does things personally delivered. And he tends to have his, other people for him handle the communications. So it makes it more difficult for someone to have actual concrete evidence of documents where Trump it doesn't appear to be texting. I mean, he may go on Twitter, but he is not having those communications. He delegates it, and so it insulates him in a lot of different ways. And I mean, there could have been legitimate business reasons for doing that, but when you come to try to make a white-collar case, and it doesn't matter whether someone's looking at tax or whether someone's looking at communications with other parties, for example, if someone were trying to figure out communications regarding emails, in terms of what was going to be released by WikiLeaks, he seems to be very disciplined on not leaving a paper trail.
Absolutely. And we sort of came up with a few themes that I'd like to kind of hit at with you. But one of the things that you really predicted this entire time was how the Cohen investigation was going to unfold, how the Manafort investigation was going to unfold. And you continued to sort of predict it where everybody wanted sexy. Everybody who has been following this and investigating this as we have, we wanted something so big. And you said it's not going to be like that. It's going to be this chipping away of this puzzle. And in respect to Cohen, you had told me a long time ago what they're going to look for are campaign violations. They're going to look at what happened with the National Enquirer. And here we are. And what happened?
And it's simply because we all can sit here and over the past year, everyone has put together what they believe has happened. But when it comes to prosecuting a case, Mueller's team, and also because it can be really viewed as political, they want to make sure that they have all the evidence, and that not only is it proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but where they feel very strong about it. So, the only time you're going to have that are in tax cases, FEC violation, or any other type of or anything where someone is going to sign a document under penalty of perjury. So it makes it the easiest. Usually a lot of other offenses are going to involve, how am I going to put it? If someone is doing something that may be illegal, somehow it may trigger the tax side. If, for example, one of the things I think when you and I first met, and it was the reason I thought FEC is going to come up, is because one of the issue was whether or not the Trump campaign, let's say after the hacking, whether or not if they accepted any good or service from a foreign entity, it would be an FEC violation. And so then that came up. And so if you take that good or service, or you take something from a corporation, so it's just because at least it's a documentary proof. Because otherwise you're relying on people's memory, you're relying on testimony, and people can be impeached. But documents that are created along the line, then those are the types of things that, as you and I were just discussing yesterday, what did that one juror who went on Fox News say that she did? Oh, Gates, who had flipped? Oh, we just decided to not consider what he said, but we looked at the documents.
Right. You told me the whole time paper doesn't lie, and that's what's so kind of reassuring, because before we go on to Manafort, let's say one more thing about some of the breaking news related to Cohen and the National Enquirer and Pecker. And what's so interesting is you had told me no matter how good of friends somebody working for the National Enquirer is with Donald Trump, they're not necessarily going to just say, well, we're going to give this person $150,000 to kill a story. What you had said as a lawyer with expertise is that the prosecutors will then look for a trail of what happened, because no matter how much you love somebody, you're probably not going to throw $150,000 at it without getting reimbursed. So do you think that there is something going on here with David Pecker getting immunity, and that we're going to see more shall be revealed there?
Well, I think that when the prosecution was looking at it, when they subpoenaed the records in April, the corporation just had to take a look at it. And there are too many people involved, too many employees, accounting departments, other people who would touch it. And they had to make a decision on how they were going to handle it. And they decided to cooperate. And I think that the prosecution, particularly with respect to Pecker individually, it sounds like, based on the reporting, that they offered immunity. And in part because then they have a completely separate line of evidence that's separate from Cohen. Because the prosecution knew that Cohen had gone out and had lied repeatedly to the public, or had his representatives lie, had Stormy Daniels sign a false document in January 2018. So when they're going and presenting a witness who's lied repeatedly and then maybe has a motive, then it's simply important for, I think, the prosecution to have another set of eyes that isn't Michael Cohen, to say what happened here. Why? FEC is like IRS. We all know, maybe, if you get audited and only 1% of the population gets audited by the IRS, but if you're the person who gets audited, the microscope's on you.
Right.
On the FEC, someone like, Trump can say, oh, everyone does this. Well, you know what? There are people, situations where you have FEC counsel, and they train corporations and individuals how to give contributions. And that campaign was the Trump campaign had good FEC counsel. They had Jones Day. They had Red Curve, who's an FEC specialist, and the treasurer of the Trump campaign is really knowledgeable. But I have a feeling that no one went to any of those and said, we really want to make sure that if it's the month before the campaign, that if Mr. Trump at that time pays any of these women, will that be deemed to be campaign? I don't think they asked anyone for advice. They just did it themselves. And so I think that when you're trying to look at what else, why does this go criminal? Right. Instead of just a fine or refund or something. Why are they doing it? And that's where they look at the documents, and they look at creating a shell corporation, creating phony agreements. What was the intent? All of a sudden, just the month before the campaign. So when they're able to look at not just Cohen's characterization of it or his attorneys, but they're able to look at American media, right, and they have documents, that's all that someone could ask for, because they know they're going to be under scrutiny. Right. Prosecutors have a lot of discretion. And there may be cases that don't get filed because they just don't feel that they have the evidence or the proof, or that the witnesses aren't reliable and they don't want to risk a loss. And then you have a case like this where all the eyes are upon them and they've got to go out and justify why in this case did they go criminal. And the FEC, why? Because you have a corporation paying the funds. You have sham agreements. You have repeated lies. Why lie about it?
False invoices.
I've discovered why lie about who paid it and when. Right. So all that goes to motive. And it also goes, so it's a very, I think there are a couple of other factors that the FEC looks at. And, but I also think it's one of the reasons why Mueller, on this type of case, when Cohen came within their ambit, referred it out to the Southern District of New York.
Right.
Because then to say, well, we started looking at him and this is what all came about. And I mean, it was the Wall Street Journal that broke it just 2 days after the election.
Right.
And that's how long it has taken us from November 4th of 2016. It's taken a year and a half to come to this point. Yeah. And that's on that's a tax fraud and FEC case.
But what you have taught me is to have patience and to allow the process to work. Because as long as it feels like it's taking, this is moving fast. When we look back on previous major prosecutions, this is actually moving pretty quickly.
Most white-collar cases, I mean, they're 3 years, 4 years. It takes time. And so, but I also think that, is this political? Sure, it's political. And when it's political, it's just, I think I was telling you, I've had clients that all of a sudden, the LA Times or someone's written articles about them, the government's never looked at them. Well, when there's a couple of pieces in the paper,
right, or
it's on the news, all of a sudden, it's higher profile. Law enforcement takes a look at it. So I just think that they have to make sure that regardless of the publicity, regardless of the politics, that they can genuinely say that this went criminal and they made those decisions and didn't let it be a fine because of everything else. And I think with Cohen in particular, when there was the false statement to the bank in order to get the HELOC financing to pay that amount, when you had something like that, then you've got another offense, and that also puts it in that other category. So, as much as, people, you and I were talking the other day about how someone will say Mueller's a flip specialist. Everyone else, why don't they just let people flip? Well, cooperation, just testimony, someone's testimony, and saying that someone else said something just isn't enough. If they don't have a wire, if they don't have a video, if they don't have some documentation
right,
that can support it, they're not going to, the U.S. Attorney's Office doesn't do it in just everyday fraud cases that I have.
Right.
Because they have a very high conviction rate. I mean, 98% of all federal cases, I believe it's 96 or 98%, resolved by plea.
Wow.
And then once they do go to trial, it's a very high conviction rate, far higher than state court. And they want to have the deterrent effect, which is that if we charge you and we prosecute you, we believe we have the evidence and we believe it's, that we're going to win. They don't win in every case.
Right.
It's an overwhelming majority, and particularly in fraud cases.
Fabulous. And you gave me a perfect segue into discussing Manafort, because so many people, again, lay persons say, why didn't he plead? Why didn't he cop a plea? Well, you had a really smart answer to that. Let's hear it.
Well, and we don't know what conversations went on, but by the time one of the things I think, in order to guarantee a conviction, they loaded it up. The 5 tax counts were pretty cut and dry.
Right.
However, when they added on all the bank fraud, he's facing so much time. So one of the things could be that the deal they were offering him wasn't very good. If it was take 15 or 20 years, when you're almost 70 years old, think, well, you know what, let me go to trial.
Right.
That particular jurisdiction is a little bit conservative.
Right.
And as we saw from that one juror
right.
went on, he knew that maybe he'd have a good jury pool. And he did.
Right.
He had a great jury pool. So that's one of the issues. And the second issue is that just going in and cooperating and, offering any evidence can have a couple problems. First of all, when you go in to do a proffer session, you have to lay everything out, and that's everything else that he's done. Maybe there are a lot of other things that they would be interested in that he doesn't want to share, because if you're going to cooperate, you've got to, if you were there on the grassy knoll, JFK, you better say you were there. Anything else that you've done, you've got to lay that out. So that could also open up all other kinds of exposure. Second, he may have evidence in terms of what he heard or what he saw, but if he doesn't have hardcore documents that would be valuable enough, he may not get enough of a downward sentence or any type of cooperation. So just flipping isn't enough. You have to show that you can make a case.
What's interesting is you mentioned that he was brought in relatively late by Roger Stone, so it's not like he's somebody who'd been there all along. So what did he know? Maybe not as much as some other people might have known.
And I don't know that he wasn't like Cohen that'd been around for 10 years, but Trump has his close circle of people that he really trusts, and that's a very small circle. And so if all of a sudden Manafort he shows up in April or May, he's gone by August, he may talk about him in terms of acting as if he has some respect for his prior experience, but there's no indication that they were friends for years or that he would have trusted him with the deepest secrets. We certainly see that when there was the meeting which Manafort attended over on that June 6th meeting in Trump Tower, the email goes from, the contact to Don Jr.
Yep.
And Don Jr. arranges it. It's sent. It's involving the brother-in-law, Jared.
Right.
And he arrives. Manafort's there, but he doesn't seem to be the driving person behind it. So, you don't know that Manafort may have had that much to offer. Wow. And so we can just sort of assume maybe he did, but there are so many other considerations. And the worst thing you can also do is if you're, as a lawyer, if you just think that your client, if someone like, Paul Manafort isn't able to go into a proffer meeting and say, and own all your stuff.
Right.
Say, here I am. You know what? I did commit a couple felonies. Yes. Here's what I did. Yes, I'll agree that these Cyprus corporations were all BS. If you can't go in and own it, you can't go in because they'll just say, sorry, we don't believe you. We think you're lying. And then not only, and if you do go in and get defensive, which is so easy to happen because someone hates to admit, it's hard for a 69-year-old man to go and admit that the last 20 years of their life that really they've been perpetuating tax fraud and doing other things. And if someone isn't in that place, then the U.S. Attorney's Office and the agents will just say, we don't believe you. We've asked you some questions. You lied to us. And not only if they think they're lying, but if they ask them a couple questions and if the person doesn't answer it accurately or truthfully, they have to cut them because the agents prepare a report afterwards. And if they were to use them as a witness, if they showed that they lied and then there's obstruction, Manafort's attorney was smart in not putting him on the stand. He didn't offer any witnesses. He was really, he kept it where Manafort can then go in and say, look, he just made the government try their case. So I just think it's a very, I see a lot of lay people said, he's going to flip. And even with Cohen, they made a decision not to give him special, he's not getting any special deals. I don't think they needed him. Every piece of evidence they got out of Cohen, they got through a search warrant. Now, maybe he can give the color commentary on it and explain it, but they got it off a search warrant. And then they already had American media.
Yes.
Right. So it's such a difficult place for any of these people to be. And so, but I think that it's, as everyone sits back and they just can't believe that a case can be made, I don't think they realize how hard it is. And look, when you just think how long it's taken.
I think it's amazing. And you brought up a couple other things that I think are so important. One of them is that this small circle that Trump trusts, that loyalty circle, you used a term today about abuse of loyalty. And I think that's really important because he talks that loyalty talk, but what I'm hearing is no honor among thieves. And then you brought up that abuse of loyalty. And what's your interpretation of that?
Well, people who are in, and I've seen it in like small mom and pop corporations, or I've even, you see it at even big companies like Enron.
Yes.
That what happens is someone gets close, they trust people, but yet they, there is an honor among, there's a criminal code of conduct.
Yes.
And the criminal code of conduct is if you're doing something that's not legal, that if you get caught, you keep your mouth shut.
Right.
That's not how normal people operate.
Right.
Normal people would say, you know what, I did this, and you know what, I should have known. I'll just go in and tell people what happened.
Yeah.
You don't have to go in and make up any lies.
Yeah.
What Trump was willing to do, I think, we look back at what happened, when you go back to November the 4th, 2016, when the Wall Street Journal broke this, Trump had no qualms about lying to Hope Hicks, it appears, lying to the other people on the campaign. I'm sure he didn't tell Kellyanne Conway or Stephen Bannon that, oh, yes, this was what we were doing with American media, and here's what happened with McDougal, and here's what happened with Stormy Daniels. Doesn't tell them, and then a young woman like Hope Hicks, who he claims to be so loyal to and who he claims to be so fond of, has her absolutely go out and lie to the Wall Street Journal, lie to the American people, and just has absolutely no shame about it. And it is sort of the ends justify the means. So I think he expects loyalty from other people, but his loyalty is, maybe in a way he feels he's protecting them. He doesn't tell them, so then they can go and lie. And he views these as he's one of those people that just, well, this is what you have to do to get ahead.
Right.
This is just what you have to do. And everybody was being unfair to him. And so the end justifies the means. But he's had a lot of litigation experience in his career. He and his team have no idea. This isn't some civil lawsuits, they settle on the courthouse steps, just like Trump University. People sign settlement and confidentiality agreements, and people go away. This is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was prepared that he was a well-known person beforehand, but he had no idea that when you're in a position of power, and not only that, and you're leading a country, and also maybe when you have half the country that isn't your biggest fan, you're going to be under intense scrutiny, and you have to hold yourself to a different standard. And it's always these little, it's the little lie. And what's a trial lawyer would say, so if someone's going to lie about that, why aren't they going to lie about the bigger things?
Right.
And so it's a really common sense. So just little lies, throwaway lies about, it's one thing to be a salesman and say, look at the economy, aren't we doing great? But it's another thing to say, no, we didn't know about this American media deal with McDougal. We didn't know about it. And he's very careful in that he doesn't go out and a lot of times say it himself. He lets all these other people do it, doesn't give them the information, so they have plausible deniability. And but I do think that it shows his own character issues. And you also see Cohen's character issues. They had no trouble sitting there and lying and that's why Cohen couldn't, I think it's why they decided we're not going to give him a 5K1, which is the motion the government files for downward departure for cooperation, because he purposefully lied and misled for so long. So I think it's very frustrating to, I think, a lot of Americans that when you see, people who, don't seemingly get caught, but, they've got to use search warrants. They have to use real evidence. They can't just use common sense and say, well, come on, everyone's going to do this, because the juries aren't going to do it. So it's been and it will be the small cases. So it's a very
sticky wicket.
I just certainly hope. Yeah, and I certainly hope that people, understand that someone like that Manafort.
I'm going to have you repeat that because you're freezing up a little bit. I might be losing you. Repeat that last line. I've got a couple more minutes of things I want to ask you.
Okay, sure. I'm just saying that we do, part of it is that they really will do their best, I think, the Manafort team, not to be political.
Yes, right.
And there are Republicans on that team, and there are Democrats on that team, but the point is that it needs to go. And if they don't have the evidence, they're not going to charge someone. If they don't think that they can win, again, if it's not bulletproof, they're not going to charge anyone.
Right, that's right.
And they would need evidence. The statements that that if Cohen's guilty, Trump must be guilty, they are still going to have to prove that he accepted those contributions, that he knowingly accepted them, and they're going to have to look at what evidence there is there.
Beautiful.
Now, what were you going to ask? You said you can ask.
Yes, I have a couple more things because, again, one of the things that's so great about free press interviews is that I take my media knowledge, and what I always specialized in was trying to make things so simple so I wouldn't lose a single viewer when I was producing locally here. And so much of this is very complicated, and people want simple answers. And one of the things that people are jumping up and down about are, why can't he be indicted? Why, can't he be impeached? And in my studies of what Putin did in Russia when he first came to power, among the first two things he did was pardon Yeltsin and then make it impossible to criminally prosecute a sitting president. And I think we sort of have some of that going on here. It seems like wherever you read, it's like impeachment is political and indictments don't happen of sitting presidents. And what do you have to kind of say to illuminate those complexities?
Yeah, I think there's, these rules are there so things aren't political.
Okay.
And it is political. So when did it happen with, they need the votes. And that's why no one's going to seek to impeach as long as the Republicans have a majority.
Okay.
And so I think by not demanding it, or the reason I think that some people who understand the political process say, let's just wait. Don't start beating the impeachment drum, because then that makes the criminal prosecutions look political. And if you want to have credibility, you have to say this isn't about trying to force an impeachment. We're going to file the charges where we see them, and this is separate from the political process.
Okay.
I mean, Clinton knew when he had, Clinton knew when he had a number on his back. And I think Trump, does he have a number on his back when it comes in terms of some of the individuals in Congress who would like to have him impeached because of not from crime, but just because of they feel he's unfit to serve.
Right.
But then that's a political decision, and so that should be separate from any criminal case.
Okay. And as far as indicting a sitting president,
the general understanding is that they won't, that won't be done. It doesn't mean he couldn't be prosecuted later, but but I think it's to avoid criminal prosecutions that would be politically motivated.
Okay.
So it's, so I think, it would be 2 years that someone would have to wait, and they can vote him out of office, and then the process can proceed. So it's simply, that's just going to be something that, we do want to process, because, there can be the time. I mean, right now the Republicans have a majority. There can be the time when, it can be turned around on the Democrats.
Yes.
It certainly can, and it was before.
Yes.
So I think let's just keep them separate. I mean, it doesn't mean people can't feel that Trump should be impeached just because they don't think he's fit.
Yeah, there's a pattern of dishonesty here that we've never seen anything like before in a, we've had bad presidents before. I've just finished studying Buchanan. He was not a great president, okay? He was a bad president. This pattern of dishonesty is very difficult for cognitive thinkers, for people who are used to getting information and knowing what's fact and fiction. So that has made people very upset.
But as a researcher now too, and an investigator, everyone's in it because you can go online and find out so much.
Right.
And so one of the things that I do think will probably happen is that there is going to be that whole process with the Trump organization and with the two executives that were named Executive 1 and Executive 2 in the plea agreement, and the processing for payment. Why was it characterized as legal expenses? So there's going to be the individuals that handled that characterized it. There is, right now, it's not clear. Trump said that he made those payments himself.
Right.
he made it sound like he personally did it. Now, there's some information out there where it looks like maybe it might have come out on the Trump organization.
Right.
Perhaps it came out of his trust. But someone made that characterization as a legal expense. And why did they do it? Now, was it deducted on a tax return? But there's going to be a layer of people, the person who processed the check, the person who got it,
Yes.
the person who rounded it up
Yes.
for Cohen's tax reason, who gave him a bonus.
Uh-huh.
And so that process is going to go forward, and then we don't know what else is out there with respect to the others. So I think keeping the pressure on, being demanding,
Right.
expecting these things is important. But I think that it's, like I said, I think the Mueller's team knows that this is a pretty historical time. All of the people on that team, most of them were partners at major law firms. They have a ton of experience, and if someone said, well, I think there's a 99% chance that we could, no, they won't take the case.
Yes.
They won't take the case on my little healthcare fraud kickback case.
Yes.
They want something because the deterrent effect is also that they want to show that if we have it, if we say we have the goods, we have the goods.
Right.
And we could all sit here and say, well, come on, there's enough to indict him now, or there's enough to impeach him now. No, there's not.
Right.
Let Trump just go on and do his free-for-alls, and I mean, they'll just get more evidence out of it.
Yes.
I think it's I'm sure that's not what his counsel is, but he's attuned, as he puts here, like his thinking. He's attuned to the news cycle, and he thinks it'll be stale bread in a month. Because that's the way it is for a lot. Not with this.
No. Mm-mm.
No one's let go of it, and he just didn't have that experience.
Yeah.
He does not. He keeps those little. I think when he goes for advice on these things, he just gets the advice of people that he really trusts. That's why I was saying before. I think that when all these issues came up on, hey, what am I going to do? I think that this woman's extorting me. 2006, 2007. All of a sudden, McDougal's showing up and making these claims. Gee, waiting 10 years. But he's not. I don't think he's going to Jones Day. His lawyers at Jones Day. I don't think he was to people that would, because they would tell him, don't do a phony document. Pay her, figure out what you might need to do, tie it. Don't use shell corporations. Don't do phony agreements. Don't call it a legal expense. Don't do things that later are going to give someone a whole laundry list of reasons why you were mischaracterizing this. And so because you're going to create a problem, because he's not thinking 5 or 6 steps ahead.
No, clearly.
And documents are already there. They're not doing it. So, the hard part is that, with respect to the emails, I've always thought that the one crime is sort of could the people in the Trump campaign could they be found for aiding and abetting after the fact? The hacking occurred earlier, so then what's their duty? We all know once it's public, once it's on WikiLeaks, assuming you didn't put it on WikiLeaks or you didn't encourage it to be there, you're allowed to use anything in the domain. You're allowed. So then it's, did they get something of value? Did they know? Was there some timing? And it's a difficult, it's not treason necessarily because we technically aren't at war with Russia, but it is, what did they get? And I also think that the Russians were seemingly fairly bright about not leaving a paper trail themselves. I mean, there's that one email with Don Jr., which I think that's someone who seems like he wanted to position himself to, the person who sent that, the Emir or Ron, whatever his name, Goldstone. I can't remember his name.
Yes, that's right.
But that it's almost as if he wanted to show, look who I'm bringing.
Yes.
But maybe there's some emails out there, but that's not usually how they're going to operate. They're not going to leave a trail like that. That was kind of a little bit rookie, that was sort of a rookie move on their part. So, but I think we'll see what's going on, and I think we see the other FEC violations that may be occurring will be the woman with the NRA connections.
Absolutely.
And
It's nice to see that from what you told me from the beginning is they were going to start with the low-hanging fruit, build up from there, because that's how you build these cases. Couple minutes left. I
yeah.
just want to ask you, what can people expect next? What should we be looking for next?
Well, I think it's going to, I think there's going, there's going to be different pockets of cases. Obviously, there's that next Manafort trial,
Yes.
and then he's going to have to, Manafort and his counsel have to make some decisions on how they're going to proceed there.
Right.
I think that next trial would be something that will hit a little bit closer to home,
right,
in terms of, sort of the Trump campaign. So I don't think even then we're going to see that the prosecution is going to play it very conservatively,
okay,
in terms of who they call as witnesses, and they're also going to be really careful about what they allege. And I think then we're just going to see. I think it's not just low-hanging fruit, but I think that in most cases, the tax cases, the FEC, anything where you can get documentation is just a way of doing it. So it's Cohen really wasn't such low-hanging fruit,
yeah,
and neither was Manafort,
no,
really.
that's right.
But I do think that, but it's not the kind of case where you have a bunch of secretaries or low-level people who know anything
Yes,
about what was
that's
going on.
true. That's right.
So I think if anything, they had to go. I mean, they went with Flynn. I mean, they've got Flynn. I mean, there are a couple of other people, but they just didn't have the documentation that was needed, and I think that was necessary. So I think there may be a little bit more. And, depending upon the documents or depending what's there, it may be a call. I think Mueller will ultimately then write a report on whether or not, with respect to, whatever comes out with respect to President Trump, who, what happened there and what other documents, he might have done. We know that there's some other things they didn't disclose, but it will be, can someone, Cohen's in a bit of a different position than Trump because Cohen is a lawyer. Cohen raised millions of dollars for Trump. He should know about campaign finance laws. In April 2017, Cohen became the deputy chairman of the finance committee of the Republican National Committee. You need to know something about campaign contributions.
Right.
With a lawyer, they're held to a different standard. And so what we don't know is did Cohen, did Trump, did Pecker, did anyone say, I wonder if this could be characterized as a campaign contribution? I mean, the rules are really simple in the FEC. Corporations can't make a contribution to an individual. And if Michael Cohen, as an individual, pays a personal bill of President Trump, regardless of whether or not it advances the campaign, it is automatically deemed to be a contribution.
Gotcha.
The only reason in this case why it went criminal is because of all the other lies and mischaracterizations. Because then it wasn't someone just paying the personal bill. It was making sure that you're going to hide, that no one's going to find out about it, and that you aren't even going to do the things to either make sure that Trump pays it back,
Mm-hmm.
That he doesn't arrange to pay it back, and you're also going to make sure that the campaign doesn't pay it back and that there's absolutely no reporting on it. So it is, it'll be very, it's just hard to say what's going to happen. And we don't know. I saw there was some reporting from the Wall Street Journal that one of the individuals in American media had recording devices in his office. I mean, in the entertainment business, a lot of times people who are agents, they have other people on the phone taking notes.
Absolutely.
It's real routine. So something like American media might be different, and you never know what's going to happen. But I do think we just have to put the pressure on. And there's always going to be the people that are going to criticize Mueller, that are going to criticize that team. But I suppose unless you've been there, it's really hard to be in their shoes because they cannot make a mistake. They can't be in the position of filing a case and losing a trial. I mean, they just can't. And as much as, there may be other types of cases where someone can say, well, I'll just put, you know what, they'll have a long day. You know what, we may lose. I've had cases that, here in California, government's like, well, we may not win. But you know what, they just go on to do another case. And so I also think that the integrity, they want to bring integrity for the agents. I think they want to bring integrity for Department of Justice. And I think it's their own reputations that if it's a close call, they're just, I think that individuals are going to have to accept the fact that not every crime gets prosecuted. And even in this case, there are going to be some people that won't be prosecuted because they just don't have the evidence. And so, then I think there's a point where, we all wish that we, in searching, that we wish that witness is going to come out of the woodwork.
Yes, we sure do.
And it just hasn't happened.
Right.
I mean, not on some of the things that, we suspect or that we know. I do think I'll be curious about Roger Stone in terms of what happens.
Yes.
I think that's going to be something to really watch out for.
Yes.
I think because there's more there.
There is more there. On that happy note, I'm going to sleep better tonight. I'm on my way to the Hollywood Bowl to see some Chopin. I think it's Prokofiev. Thank you so very much. And as soon as something breaks on Roger Stone, we'll do number two. We'll do part two. Thank you, Tracy. Have a great night.
Bye.
You're brilliant. Bye-bye.